Welcome to my channel. My name's Bissy, and the heartbreak and discomfort in this episode was visceral. I've got to tell you, this breakdown's been the most difficult one I've ever had to make. Lestat's reluctance is palpable, and I felt as drained and confused as Daniel must have. But Lestat's staunch denial of the train accusation is so much clearer to me now. This episode was incredibly heavy. It was brutal. And I'm going to break down every detail I could find in it. At the end of this video, there'll be a spoiler section where I go into further detail on certain themes and reveal book context too. If you're enjoying my videos, please do like and subscribe. It would mean the world to me. Okay, and with that said, let's get into the breakdown. The episode opens on Lestat and Gabriella hunting. They seem to have fallen into a devious routine. And simply, Gabriella is a menace. She's a terrible influence in my opinion. Or is she providing the exact distraction that Lestat wanted? Or that he needed from her? Daniel and Christine are trying to keep some kind of schedule going. And whilst Daniel was trying to get Lestat to the studio to film, Dr. Farid mentions a study in Budapest where 2 Class B vampires survived decapitation for 2 hours. He also mentions that somebody of Lestat's caliber could survive more. Now this is foreshadowing, I think, to Louis's rampage. Now I made a video recently breaking down every vampire in the Immortal universe. If you haven't already, do check that out. I think you'll find it interesting. But my questions for now are, who's conducting these studies? To what end? And who's reading the papers? And are they being published? Another thing to note is that Daniel mentions the other 2 attempts on Lestat's life during this tour. Now these attempts are outside the Detroit attack. Will we get any more info on this? I wonder. We also learned that Daniel was changed by Armand on the 18th of July 2022. Now, this is so crucial, as the last session with Louis and Armand took place on the 26th of June 2022, where Daniel exposed Armand's seismic lie, and Louis told Armand to not lay a finger on him. So Armand changed Daniel on the 22nd day after that event. What happened in those 22 days? Does Daniel remember? Is this the trauma? Did Armand keep him for all that time? What do you think? Also, Lestat says Daniel's brief life. What happens to Daniel? Lestat later mentions that Daniel's seed of hatred would be watered later in the sun. Is this how Daniel ends? Or did Lestat mean something would happen to him and Daniel's seed of anger would be watered as he witnesses this? What do you think? Then we get into the interview itself, and Lestat's reluctance is so clear. Daniel continues to prod at Lestat's stutter. We learn that he had the stutter between the ages of 9 and 29. But Lestat worries to Christine that Daniel was trying to entrap him with these questions about his stutter. But what could that mean? Do you have any theories? Because I'm at a complete loss. Lestat goes on to mention that this entire endeavour is not about asses on seats or streams on Pandora. Now, just a note, I didn't know that there actually was a streaming service called Pandora. So I got very excited when I heard the name, as there's a significant character in the future with this name. And I'll explain why in the spoiler section. Point 1. Lestat admits that the inciting incident, the thing that happened that seemingly caused his stutter, was the sight of witnessing so-called witches being burnt at the stake, when he was just 9 years old. However, he thinks, looking back on it now, that the twins were definitely witches. Now, there are a pair of twins who are witches in the Chronicles, but I don't think these are who he's referring to. But as soon as they are brought up, I'll go right into that. Lestat says that the point of the songs are pure expression. He's also said that he's doing a rewrite. So why is he playing games? Lestat ends the interview by dropping a bombshell on Daniel. He mentions his mother for the first time, which is a trip, as she of course is in the room. Gabriella herself is playing mind games with Lestat by instructing Yada to put on the Lestat wig and then going with him so very loudly into the bathroom. I found it interesting that Lestat thought that Daniel had left his mother out of the book on purpose. Did he really speak to Louis about Gabriella? I mean, he says, no room for the many hours I spoke of her. I guess. Lestat only introduced his mother into the story for Daniel after she and Yada came back from their bathroom break. He's seething. And I believe that this is one of the precious moments of something real we get from Lestat that night. We then cut to the farm. Louis does exactly what Raglan James and the Talamasker wanted. He's on mission and looking for killer, dispensing of every member of the Fang Gang in his path. Dr. Farid's foreshadowing comes into play as we see the headless vampire on the floor as Louis tries to read his jumbled thoughts. Now, did we just see Louis use the cloud gift? Or was it a graceful jump? Now, to me, this shows that Louis does indeed have the cloud gift. I mean, it looked to me that he propelled himself at will. He didn't just launch into a jump, in my opinion. So this then begs the question, when did Louis learn to harness the cloud gift? Did he have it whilst in Dubai? Were we wrong about Armand keeping the bookshelves out of Louis' reach? Did he outright lie to Daniel about having the gift? Or did he discover that he had it and then learn to harness it after he left Armand? It's been about 3 years since then, and we're seeing that Louis has a new vampire relationship and new connections. What do you think? And then notably, Louis sets the captives free, and you see his planning as he has a vehicle waiting for them outside. Now, I thought this was pretty great of Louis, as yes, he's on a mission, but he is not the monster here. Not tonight. Okay, now we get to Nicholas. As Lestat starts his story, his hand is the main focus of the frame. In fact, his hands are the focus of many of the frames during this interview. Lestat tells Daniel that he meets up with Nicholas in Paris. He's no longer going by Leoncourt. In fact, he's dropped his title completely. Did Nicky's dad actually send him, or was Lestat looking for Nicholas? It seems like Lestat doesn't like anyone else calling Nicholas Nicky. He corrects Claudio in season 1, and again Daniel here. And for the first time, Lestat portrays himself as a little awkward at 29. None of the dangerously intoxicating charisma that oozes out of him in other scenes. Lestat stops the story abruptly and calls Nicholas his bipolar boyfriend. He says that he was severely depressed. Lestat looks at Gabriella when he says his first love. Was this because we have more of the story to hear? It seemed that Lestat was speaking directly to the audience when he says, fast forward, stop, vape, check your phone, press play. Oh good, now he's a vampire. Whilst Lestat is describing how he trained himself out of his stutter, he's got his eye on Gabriella and Yada. He's distracted, but not so distracted as to actually let Daniel all the way in. Not just yet. Lestat calls Nicky his first love, not a great love. Now, what did I just watch was how I felt when I watched this unfold for the first time. I'm not so surprised that they made changes to the book. In spoiler section point 2, I'll go into every book difference point by point. But I've also made a video on Nicky and Lestat's entire relationship from the book, if you'd like to see how that played out in its entirety. Now, for anyone who's watched more than a few of my videos, you'll know how optimistic and positive I am. You'll also know that I absolutely love this show, so it won't surprise you that I'm hoping that we'll get a fuller, more rounded and less biased version of their time together. Now, when I say biased, I mean Lestat's bias, as he has a lot of guilt over the events, and that of course has coloured his retelling in my opinion. From the scenes that we did get, it seemed that Lestat is blaming himself entirely for Nicky's end. He almost frames Armand as someone who acted with mercy in the end. Almost. Lestat says that he destroyed Nicky. And feeling like that, I can completely understand this framing. Whether this is how it actually happened, or simply how he wants to frame the events to Daniel, I don't know. It seemed like he believed that he drove Nicholas into madness with his gaslighting. He was different, he had changed, and Nicky noticed, but Lestat kept telling him that what he was seeing was not what he was seeing. And that is maddening. But then Lestat breaks and asks Nicholas, do you want me to take your life? And Nicky screams that he wants Lestat to love him enough to give it to him. Then Lestat says that Nicholas cut off his own hands, as Lestat begs him to stop. Nicky then asks Lestat to cut the other. Lestat can't, but all he can do is hold Nicky. He says that Armand throws Nicholas into the fire and pins him down through the chest, as Lestat watches. And just a note, did you notice Daniel's face when he thought he was getting something real? It wasn't the empathetic Daniel from Dubai. He looked like he was in the throes of increasing wonder, so to speak. Armand said it in season 2. This is his drug. Daniel brings up the fact that Lestat sings about his abuser every night. Now, Lestat cannot or won't accept the term. Instead, he calls Magnus his liberator. We see a version of Lestat's turning. The story is framed in a stylized way, like a music video from the 90s in my opinion. It actually made me think of David Brent's self-funded cover of Simply Red's If You Don't Know Me By Now. But the sinister and terrifying nature of Magnus's intrusion and obsession can only be masked for so long. As Magnus sits and drinks opposite the etching of Lestat, the reality of the darkness creeps through, as we see the bodies of his previous victims hanging above the table like some kind of grotesque chandelier. Lestat's denial and reluctance is at its most apparent during this section. And heartbreakingly, we find out exactly why very soon. Back with Louis, it seems like it's Bruce and Baby Jenks' wedding night. We see that Bruce has Baby Jenks' name tattooed on his hand, similar in style to the one on the back of her neck. Bruce and Baby Jenks speak about making a baby that night, as they discover Louis waiting for him in the basement. Louis sits calmly, after what he had just done, and before what he's about to do. And this calm is chillingly comforting to me. Bruce, of course, doesn't know who Louis is at this point, and tries to attack, but Louis is faster. Louis incapacitates Bruce and sits him down to listen. Louis reads Claudia's words from the torn-up pages of her diary. Now, in a way, now that we know their contents, I'm so glad that Louis kept them from Daniel. I'm glad that 2022 Daniel didn't have access to these words. In his hands, at that time, I don't believe he would have handled them as delicately as they deserve to be. He didn't love Claudia. He didn't know the full story of her tragically short life. We saw what he did when Louis expressed the haunting memory. Daniel was still getting to grips with his subject back then. So not hearing Claudia's words until Louis recited them to the perpetrator, well, to me, it felt just. It felt fitting that the ears hearing them are those of the monster who inflicted those horrors. And most fittingly, that they are the last words he heard before his own end. Louis sets him alight with those pages, and Bruce burns. Now, initially, I worried that Louis walked away too soon. But then we see Baby Jenks sifting through Bruce's ashes. She finds his wedding ring, and now this is what worries me. I mean, she isn't going to leave it at that, is she? Now, on a side note, I wondered if Baby Jenks had been turned, but I'm not sure as her nails are ombre French, as opposed to the milky white we see from most vampires. I mean, she could have had her nails done for her wedding, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. Once it's done, Louis takes a call from Lemuel? He's checking on him, and I wonder what their relationship is actually like. They seem to communicate well. They seem to be on the same page. Could this actually be Louis' healthiest relationship so far? And back to Claudia's words. They play over Lestat's actual memory of his turning. You can see the piles of bodies in the tower behind Lestat. And they haunt him now in the backseat of his car. Magnus violated Lestat in more than one way. And who knows how many times it happened. The look on Lestat's face when the assault is over, before Magnus bit him, I mean, it's just so incredibly heartbreaking. And as I mentioned in my intro, Lestat being accused of threatening something that he himself had suffered, well, I can see exactly why he was so furious. I can see how reading those words in a book that millions have read could have undone him. We hear Magnus say to Lestat the lines that he recited to himself in Season 2 after the trial. Lestat couldn't or wouldn't tell the full story of his turn into Daniel. The scenes we saw, the Muse's hauntings, were so incredibly difficult to watch. And they'd be even more difficult to recount to a journalist that you don't trust. Impossible even. Magnus mentions the ghosts that sit at the long table. They've been waiting for him, and I think Lestat is going to face them very soon. He's been trying to keep them down for a while, it seems. Trying by giving them their songs. Magnus alludes to 7 seats. The hand, Nikki. The finger, Antoinette. The pimp, 20th century Louis. The drummer, TC. What's going to happen to TC? Claudia, his mother, and Lestat himself. But there are 8 places at the table. Is Magnus the last seat? And of course, we have Daniel in the ceiling. As Lestat drives, we see explosions in the background, and the lights of the CN Tower go out. But before Lestat plays his gig, he walks away from a crash. But in the background of that scene, you see the CN Tower is lit and intact. There are things happening simultaneously here, and I cannot wait to catch up. Now at the gig, Lestat plays The Loneliness, a more apt song I cannot imagine. He can't distract himself anymore. He has to feel these terrifying emotions. He's going to have to face the long table and come out on the other side, whatever that looks like. But I have nothing but questions from the gig. Like, what's going to happen with the videos of Lestat levitating? The crowd is screaming that he's floating. Where did the blood come from on his guitar? Was he just playing so hard? Where did Muse Magnus go? And side note, I thought this gig might have taken place on day 24 shooting, as TC's outfit is the same from the Instagram reel of the band. But looking at it again, I'm not sure, as Alex is in the reel, and prior to this, Daniel said that he had been trying to get something out of Lestat for over 2 months. So yeah, maybe not. Regina. Now, what can I say? I already had a lump in my throat at this scene. Louis had done it. He's avenged the terrible wrong that was done to Claudia. He can't tell Claudia directly. He can't commiserate with her. But he can visit a face that looks very much like hers. Claudia's words were spoken to that monster. No matter how difficult it was for Louis to say, or how difficult it was for us as an audience to hear, Claudia had the last say. And that to me is perfect. Louis visits the diner and we meet Regina. Her mustard uniform is very reminiscent of the last dress that Claudia wore. Just another dagger in my heart and a scene that I'll be thinking about for a very, very long time. And finally, we catch up with Alex. Now he's still in Ohio and he's struggling. Alex is missing being with the band and finding it difficult to watch their growing success without him. He shares in this meeting, a safe place to be vulnerable. However, this safe place has been infiltrated by someone, Armand. Now, I'm not saying that Armand wouldn't benefit from a meeting like this. I believe he is addicted. But what does he feel that he's addicted to? I thought that he could seriously use therapy to heal. But there is always an angle with Armand. And sadly, I still have a massive question mark over his motives for being at this particular meeting, at this particular time, in this particular country, and with that particular accent. Okay, so that's the end of the breakdown. This episode has been a lot. It's been so emotional, and this breakdown was even harder for me to break down than it was for me to watch. Okay, so if you want to stay away from spoilers and book context, now will be the time to click off. And if you do, I want to say a massive thank you for watching all the way to the end. I really appreciate you. And for anyone who is staying around, let's get into them. Okay, so point 1 is Pandora. Now, Pandora was a great love of Marius, Armand's maker. We meet her quite early on, but it's not until deeper into the Chronicles that she gets her own novel. Now, I haven't read her novel, so I can't give too much away about her story, but let me know in the comments if you have. Of course, with a spoiler warning. Now, I did want to get into book changes, and that was point number 2. So this is going to be specifically about Nicky and his story. And like I said earlier, I did an entire video on Lestat and Nicky's time together. So do check that out if you want the whole story. But very quickly, most of the changes from the book are: Nicky handed a wolf-line cloak to Lestat on behalf of a grateful village. They then spent hours in a private dining room where their attraction became known. Gabriella, or Gabrielle in the book, financed their move to Paris. They travelled to Paris together. Now, Nicky already had a darkness about him, a darkness that Lestat was attracted to. Lestat leaves Nicky and their new friends after Magnus turns him, but he can't stay away for too long. However, ultimately, Lestat is turned off by Nicky after he turns him. Lestat and Gabrielle leave for good, and it's after he's away that he receives a letter that explains that Armand had kept Nicky captive for 5 nights without sustenance. This is after Nicky's mental state declines further. Armand also cuts off both of Nicky's hands and left him locked up in a room with his violin, unable to play. When the troupe begged Armand, he finally released Nicky. Nicky then puts his fare in order and ordered the troupe to witness him throw himself into a huge pyre. Now, of course, that is different to the story that we got in the show, and that is why I was so confused with what we were seeing. I didn't know whether it was Lestat reframing the events because of his guilt, or this is the story that the show is telling us. And I think ultimately I've settled on the latter, This is the story in the show. It needs to sink in, but ultimately it is tragic. It's heartbreaking, and I cannot wait to see where they take us. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, please subscribe, and I will see you in my next one. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.